Uh, Hi, this is Joe again with another review. Originally I was going to do a movie review for this video, but I decided to do this particular topic because it's very timely and it's also the 40th anniversary of this incident, so I figured what the hell, do a review on it. And there's, of course, actually, the 40th anniversary was actually the day before. I'm recording this video on August 11th, 2017, and the incident I'm talking about happened on August 10th, 1977, and that is, of course, the arrest of the most famous serial killer in New York City history, which happened to be, of course, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. And the day I'm doing this video, CBS is going to do a 1-hour show interviewing David Berkowitz, going into what happened during the Son of Sam killings, which actually started on July 29th, 1976. And the last last shooting, I should say, happened on July 31st, 1977. So that just over a year, or 13 months, then the city of New York City was terrified over the Son of Sam killings, especially, or more into 1977 than 76, because the police didn't know exactly what they had. They thought that they had a bunch of random shootings going on, especially in July and then October. Then you had one in December of 76, and then when the years changed to 1977, you had more shootings, especially in Queens. In Queens mostly. And a couple of them was not too far from where I live. So you have one shooting in the Flushing section of Queens and one in Forest Hills, which I know exactly where it was because near the Long Island Railroad stop in the Forest Hills section of Queens. There's the Long Island Railroad. Those of you who don't know the vernacular, or the LIRR for short. And he got caught. David Berkowitz actually got arrested for it because in the scene of the National, the Stacy Markowitz was killed in the National, and Robert Valanti was virtually blinded. And the National was took place near the Shore Parkway in Brooklyn, in the Bensonhurst section of Brooklyn, and on Bay 17th Street. That's where David Berkowitz illegally parked his car in front of a fire hydrant, and he got a parking ticket. And while the cops traced the parking ticket to, of course, Berkowitz's car, which was in Yonkers, and while they were waiting for a search warrant, the cops were waiting for a search warrant from the Yonkers police. The NYPD looked into his car and through the window and saw a buff of rifle sticking out of a duffel bag, and they went into the car and they found a Son of Sam letter in the glove compartment. So hey, we got him, and they just waiting for him. Well, actually they were waiting for a search warrant to legally go into the car, and while when they were waiting for it, David Berkowitz was coming out of his apartment building, and he went in his car, and the cops pounced on him, and David Berkowitz was carrying a little brown paper bag and had the .44 Bulldog revolver, which was the gun that was used in all the shootings. And originally he was called the .44 caliber killer, which I want to get into in a minute. So when the police pounced on him, he turned to the cops very calmly like this: "What good took you guys so long?" And of course he got arrested, and he eventually, when he was first arrested, he admitted getting orders from his neighbor's dog. So they thought it was nuts, and he went to the psych evaluation and everything else, and they proved that he wasn't a psychopath. And then he was crazy, but not mentally insane. Wasn't crazy enough for him to postpone the trial. So what happened was he pleaded guilty to all the killings, even though he only actually was involved in about 3 or 4 of the shootings. There were about 8 incidents altogether. 12 people were shot. I think 12 or 13 people were shot. But I think half of them died. And which we're going to get into in a minute. Well, like I said earlier, he was originally called the .44 caliber killer because of the type of weapon that was used. .44 caliber Bulldog revolver actually was the weapon used in all the shootings. But however, there's always a however. David Berkowitz admitted he only was involved in about was involved in the actual shooting, but 3 or 4 of the killings, or of the Son of Sam shootings, not in all 8. And of course, the only evidence he could prove that with was of all the sketchless drawings of the shooter, because there were witnesses to just about all the shootings, and I think it's every one when both victims were killed. But I think there's 1 or 2 of them where both victims were killed, but there was, except for that particular shooting, all the shootings that you had a witness to, and they gave a different description to every shooting. There's about maybe five different sketches of the shooter, except for the first one. The first one looked like David Berkowitz. All the other ones, there was 2 of them that looked like one of Berkowitz's associates, named was John Carr, and the last one was a completely different person, a thin guy, wearing a blonde wig. It was actually the last shooting, the Stacy Markowitz shooting. So David Berkowitz was, he was there, he was involved, but he didn't pull the trigger on the Stacy Markowitz shooting. Even though Robert Verlatti, who was the only living victim in that, to this day he insists that Berkowitz did do the shooting, even though it was a completely different person who did it. Because there was an impartial witness to it named Tommy Zano who witnessed the last shooting. He said that was not Berkowitz, it was somebody else. Because Berkowitz was not, because Berkowitz was arrested about 10 days later. Like I said, on August 10th he was arrested. So in 10 days, you couldn't get that fat in 10 days. Because David Berkowitz was a short, stocky guy, fat like I am. So and the guy who did the shooting was a real skinny, thin guy in good shape. So no way he couldn't get. And Tommy Zano actually said this in an interview. He in a week he can't get that fat. And that's all I can say. He can't get that fat. And so Tommy Zano does not believe there was Berkowitz for the last shooting. I'm talking about, because there was only shooting that Tommy Zano was a witness to. So no way that he was involved in the Stacy Markowitz shooting. And they proved that on Unsolved Mystery, on the show Unsolved Mysteries. Actually, they proved that. But for Unsolved Mysteries, actually, there was, I'm talking about the original version with Robert Stack. They did do about 20 or 25 minutes of the Son of Sam shooting on one particular episode. But on YouTube, you can see the reboot version with Dennis Farina, and they use most of the same footage as on the original story with the Robert Stack version of Unsolved Mysteries. So check that out. Check that video out if you haven't seen it. Plus, there are also other documentaries on the Son of Sam shooting, especially interviews that David Berkowitz actually did, including from Inside Edition. It was actually hosted by Bill O'Reilly back in the day, back in 1993. And there was approximately an hour and a half total of Berkowitz being interviewed 17 years later after he was arrested, or 16 years later after Berkowitz was arrested. He said, yes, I was part of the Lieutenant Cole, and I only was involved in about 3 or 4 of the shootings. And all the other, they actually pulled the trigger on about 3 or 4 of the shootings. All the other ones were somebody else from this cult, satanic cult that I was involved in, and he admitted it. So it wasn't, but Berkowitz, the reason why he admitted to all of them was because he was the so-called fall guy. He did admit killing a couple of people and was involved in 3 or 4 shootings, so he does deserve to be in jail for the rest of his life. But for to take the fall for all the shootings, no. Only the ones he actually pulled the trigger on, he should be in jail for the rest of his life. But the other 2, one of the other suspects is dead already, and that's John Carr, and who was actually the son of Sam Carr. So that's where they got the Son of Sam bit from. The son of Sam Carr, which is David Berkowitz's landlord, who had a barking dog that drove David Berkowitz nuts. So that's why he said, "Oh, I'm the son of Sam Carr's dog." was the dog that David Berkowitz blamed for getting the orders from. But it actually was from the satanic cult, not his dog. He made the whole story up about getting the orders to kill from his neighbor's dog. So that story was kind of bullshit about him getting orders from the dog. But it was actually from the satanic cult, and he blamed his neighbor's dog on that, like I said. And his son, which was John Corr, which is mentioned in one of the letters, which I shouldn't mention. During one of the shootings, David Berkowitz left a letter calling himself the son of Sam. And he wrote a couple more letters to columnist Jimmy Breslin, who recently just passed away like a couple months ago. And he wrote a couple of letters saying John Reedy's young suffocator of rapist of young girls was actually John Corr, because his nickname was Reedy's. So John Reedy's was involved, but he was killed, and so was his brother Michael Corr. They were both killed, and they believe they were killed, or according to David Berkowitz anyway, they were killed because they were going to talk about the satanic cult, and yes, they were involved in the Son of Sam killings, but they were killed before they had a chance to really do so and set the record straight a little bit, so that they could serve their proper jail times. But so far, David Berkowitz is the only one who was in jail for the Son of Sam killings. The only one that's actually missing that you don't know that much about was the guy who committed the Stacy Markowitz killing. You don't know who that guy was, if the guy is even still alive, or if it is a real guy. You don't know. You really, really don't know. I know if Tommy Zano is still alive today. I don't know, because 4 years later. But it would be really, really interesting to get Tommy Zano's interview, and all these years later, and have him talk about the Stacy Markowitz shooting, and give another description today, 4 years later, on who he thinks